"I know how to save your company," said the poor boy to the millionaire. Richard Aldridge tightened his tie knot while staring out of the panoramic window of his office. His company, Horizon Technology, was on the brink of financial collapse. And in less than 30 days, it would be sold to his greatest rival, the same man who had humiliated him 15 years ago. That's when the door to his office opened without warning. Normally, this would have deeply irritated him, but the fatigue from sleepless nights had drained his energy. He turned, ready to dismiss whoever it was, but froze when he saw a skinny boy of no more than 10 standing in the doorway, wearing worn-out sneakers, faded shorts, and a Yankees t-shirt, 2 sizes too big. "How did you get in here?" Richard asked, genuinely confused. The building security was strict, and his secretary would never allow an unknown child to enter. The boy took 2 steps forward with disconcerting confidence. "I know how to save your company, Mr. Aldridge," he said, his voice firm despite his age. Richard almost let out a bitter laugh. A boy from the projects thought he could solve what teams of consultants and corporate restructuring specialists couldn't accomplish in months. "Look, kid, I don't know how you got in here, but you have 28 days before the shareholders vote to sell to the Mendez Group," the boy interrupted. "And I know exactly how to prevent that." The businessman felt a chill down his spine. That information was confidential, restricted to the board of directors and a few attorneys. How could a street kid know about it? "Who are you?" Richard asked, now with genuine interest. "My name is Gabriel Smith." Richard's secretary entered the office, breathless. "Mr. Aldridge, I'm so sorry. I don't know how this boy got past reception. I'll call security immediately." Richard raised his hand, signaling for her to stop. "That won't be necessary, Martha. Leave us alone for a few minutes." The woman hesitated but eventually nodded and left the office. Richard pointed to the chair in front of his desk, inviting the boy to sit. "So, Gabriel from Riverdale, tell me how you plan to save my billion-dollar company." Gabriel sat on the edge of the chair, his feet barely touching the floor. His eyes, however, displayed a disturbing depth for someone so young. "First, you need to know that your company is being sabotaged from within." The conversation was interrupted by the door opening again. A young woman of about 30, with black hair perfectly arranged in a severe bun and an impeccable blue suit, entered like a hurricane. "Dad, the meeting with the investors was—" She stopped when she saw Gabriel. "Who is this boy?" "Olivia, this is Gabriel." "Gabriel, my daughter Olivia." The woman looked at the boy with suspicion. "You shouldn't be receiving strangers right now, much less children. We have a crisis to manage." Richard massaged his temples, feeling the headache that had accompanied him for weeks intensify. "He says he has information about the company." Olivia crossed her arms, her gaze now fixed on Gabriel. "Really? And what kind of information would that be?" Gabriel wasn't intimidated. "I know that the cloud system you're developing to compete with the Mendez Group has security flaws that are being exploited. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now continuing." Olivia went pale. The Horizon Cloud project was the company's last effort to regain market share. If it had security flaws, it would be doomed before it even launched. "How do you know that?" she asked, now visibly disturbed. Gabriel took a deep breath. "Because I tried to hack into your system 6 months ago." A heavy silence took over the office. Richard and Olivia exchanged incredulous looks. "How's tried to hack our company?" Richard asked, somewhere between admiration and indignation. "I tried and succeeded," Gabriel replied without hesitation. "But not to cause damage. I wanted to show the flaws so you could fix them. I sent 5 emails to the IT department explaining the vulnerabilities. No one ever responded." Olivia advanced 2 steps toward the boy. "That's a crime, you know. You could go to juvenile detention for that." Gabriel didn't back down. "I know, but you're about to lose the company to Marcus Mendez. I thought maybe this time you'd listen." Richard felt a chill at hearing his rival's name. The mere mention of Marcus brought back painful memories of the days when they worked together, before they were torn apart by ambition and betrayal. "How do you know about Marcus?" Richard asked. "Internet," Gabriel replied simply. Everyone in the tech community knows your story. How you started together in a garage back in the 90s, how you created the first fully American financial management software, and how he forced you out of the company you created together, making you start from scratch. Richard felt the weight of those memories. 15 years had passed since Marcus, through questionable legal maneuvers, had forced him to sell his part of Digitech, the company they had created in their youth. Richard had started over, built Horizon from nothing, and for years outperformed his former partner in innovation and revenue. But the last 3 years had been difficult, with poor decisions and loss of market share, leaving the company vulnerable. "What exactly are you proposing?" Richard asked. Gabriel took a battered laptop from his worn backpack, visibly used and with some superhero stickers on it. "I can show you how your system is being compromised, and I have an idea that can not only fix the security flaws, but completely transform your product, something the Mendez Group couldn't quickly copy." Olivia let out a laugh of disbelief. "Dad, you're not really considering listening to a boy who just confessed to committing a crime against our company, are you?" Richard observed Gabriel for a few moments. There was something in that look, a mixture of intelligence and determination that reminded him of himself decades ago. 20 minutes, Gabriel. You have 20 minutes to impress me." The boy's face lit up. "That's all I need." Olivia shook her head in disapproval but remained in the room while Gabriel turned on his computer. In the next 20 minutes, the boy demonstrated with impressive clarity not only how he had found gaps in Horizon's cloud system, but also how these flaws were being systematically exploited to steal development data. More alarmingly, he presented evidence that the theft was coming from within the company itself. "Someone is sabotaging you," Gabriel concluded, "and I'm almost certain I know who it is." Richard, who had remained silent throughout the demonstration, looked at Olivia. For even she seemed shaken by the boy's revelations. "Gabriel," Richard finally said, "I need to discuss this with my security team. Could you come back tomorrow?" The boy closed his laptop and put it back in his backpack. "I can, but you don't have much time. In 28 days, Horizon will belong to the Mendez Group." "How do I know I can trust you?" Richard asked. "How do I know you're not working for Marcus?" Gabriel gave a slight smile. "Because if I were, I wouldn't have come here. I would have simply sold this information to him. It would be worth millions." Richard nodded slowly. "Come back tomorrow at 10 in the morning. I'll have them leave your name at reception." When Gabriel left, Olivia closed the office door and faced her father. "You can't be serious, a kid from the projects who hacked our systems." "He showed concrete evidence, Olivia. Evidence he could have fabricated himself," she insisted. "This could be a trap from Marcus." Richard leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of years and worries. "What choice do we have? In less than a month, everything I've worked for will belong to Marcus, unless we find a miraculous solution. And maybe the universe has sent that miracle in the most unlikely form possible." The next day at 10 o'clock sharp, Gabriel was back in Richard's office. This time, in addition to Olivia, there were Fernando Ramirez, head of product development, and Sylvia Norton, Director of Information Technology. "This is Gabriel Smith," Richard introduced him, "Fernando and Sylvia." Gabriel shook hands with the executives with a seriousness that would almost seem comical if not for the gravity of the situation. "Richard told me about your discoveries," said Sylvia, choosing her words carefully. "I must say I was quite impressed." "And concerned," added Fernando, a tall, thin man with a carefully trimmed beard. "If what you say is true, we have a serious security problem." "It's not if," Gabriel replied confidently. "It's a fact. I can show everything again if you want." Richard gestured for everyone to sit down. "Gabriel, yesterday you mentioned that you thought you knew who was behind the sabotage. That's what I want to hear now." The boy looked at everyone in the room before answering. "You have a director named Paul Vincent, right? From the finance department." Sylvia's eyes widened. "How did you—" "He's been having frequent meetings with executives from the Mendez Group," Gabriel continued. "Always in different places, never in the same restaurant or cafe twice, but always with the same people." Richard felt his blood run cold. That's a very serious accusation, Gabriel. I have proof, the boy said simply, opening his laptop. In the last 4 weeks, he's met with Rachel Carter, Vice President of Acquisitions at the Mendez Group, 6 times. He turned the screen so everyone could see. On it, several photos showed Paul, a middle-aged man with graying hair, talking with an elegant woman in various New York restaurants. "How did you get these photos?" asked Olivia, her voice betraying her disturbance. Gabriel looked away for the first time, seeming uncomfortable. "I have friends, people who need to earn a few bucks and keep an eye on things for me. You had people follow an executive from our company." Olivia was incredulous. "Only after I discovered that his emails were connected to the servers stealing information from the cloud project," Gabriel defended himself. "I needed to be sure." Richard rubbed his face, trying to process all this information. "Gabriel, even if all this is true, what exactly are you proposing? How would this save my company?" The boy straightened his posture. "I have a 3-part plan. First, we need to remove the spy without him knowing he's been discovered. Second, we need to fix the security flaws. And third," his eyes gleamed with enthusiasm, "we need to completely transform Horizon Cloud into something that not even Marcus Mendez could imagine." Fernando, who had been listening silently until then, leaned forward. "And what would this transformation be?" Gabriel smiled. "A platform that uses artificial intelligence not just to manage data, but to predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. Something that combines financial analysis with real human behavior." Sylvia frowned. "There are dozens of systems that try to do that, but none that combine social media data, purchase patterns and socioeconomic variables with the depth I'm thinking," Gabriel countered. "And most importantly, a system that's accessible not just to large corporations, but to small entrepreneurs. As well," Richard observed the boy with growing interest. "A product for the masses, not just for the business elite." "Exactly," Gabriel broke into a wide smile. "You made your mark by creating the first truly American financial software, but over time, Horizon became exactly the kind of company you criticized in the beginning: expensive, exclusive, distant from the reality of most Americans." Olivia crossed her arms, defensive. "Our products are premium because we offer premium quality." "And how many small businesses can afford that quality?" Gabriel challenged. "In Riverdale, I know dozens of micro-entrepreneurs who could grow much more if they had access to tools like yours." A reflective silence took over the room. Richard looked out the window, contemplating the New York skyline. Down there, millions of people fought daily to survive, to build their own dreams. How many of them had Gabriel's talent but would never have the opportunity to demonstrate it? "Let's suppose I buy your idea, Gabriel," Richard finally said. "How would we do this in just 28 days? The boy didn't hesitate. "We'd need a small but dedicated team, people who can work in absolute secrecy, without Paul or any other possible informant knowing." "I can lead that team," Fernando immediately offered. Something in his look had changed. Now he seemed genuinely excited. Sylvia nodded. "I can select our best engineers, people of complete trust." "And where would we work?" asked Olivia, to everyone's surprise. "If what Gabriel says is true, we can't use the company offices." Richard looked at his daughter, a slight smile forming on his lips. Despite all the reservations, she was considering the proposal. "I have an apartment in Manhattan that I hardly ever use," he suggested. "We can transform it into a temporary operations center." Gabriel clapped his hands, excited. "That would be perfect, but..." His smile diminished a little. "I would have to ask my grandmother's permission. She takes care of me." It was only then that the reality of the situation hit Richard. This brilliant boy, who could save his billion-dollar company, was just a child with school responsibilities and a concerned family. "Where is your grandmother now?" Richard asked. "Working, she's a cleaner in an office building downtown." Richard exchanged glances with Olivia and the other executives. "Gabriel, we need to talk to your grandmother. Explain the situation and get her permission for you to work with us. Obviously, you'll be very well compensated for your time and knowledge." The boy's eyes widened. "Compensated? Like real money?" Richard couldn't help but smile. "Like real money. But we still have the problem of Paul," Sylvia reminded them. If he is indeed passing information to the Mendez group, we need to neutralize him without alerting him. Leave that to me, said Richard, a renewed determination in his voice. I'll give him a special project that will keep him busy and away from our real work. Meanwhile, added Olivia, surprising everyone again, I can help organize the logistics to transform the apartment into a functional operations center. Gabriel looked at everyone in the room, an increasingly bigger smile on his face. So, are we really doing this? Richard stood up and extended his hand to the boy. We're really doing this, Gabriel. We're going to save Horizon. That same afternoon, Richard and Olivia went to Riverdale to talk to Mrs. Jane Smith, Gabriel's grandmother. The contrast between Richard's luxurious executive car and the narrow streets of the community was striking, attracting curious and some suspicious looks. Mrs. Smith's house was simple but impeccably clean and organized. Despite the evident surprise at receiving a famous businessman, the white-haired lady welcomed them with dignity and offered strong coffee that Richard sincerely accepted. So my grandson hacked into your company's computers, she asked after hearing Richard's explanation. Her voice showed no surprise, just a hint of pride mixed with resignation. He has extraordinary talent, Mrs. Smith, Richard replied. I've never seen anything like it in someone so young. The lady sighed. Gabriel has always been like that since he was little. He would take apart all the appliances in the house to see how they worked. At 6, he fixed the neighbor's TV when no one else could. At 8, he was already rebuilding computers that people threw away. Do you know where he learned programming? Asked Olivia, genuinely curious. Mrs. Smith smiled with pride. At the public library. He went every day after school. When the library got some old computers, he convinced the librarian to let him use them after hours. He said he was doing research for school, but he was really learning those codes you call programming. Richard felt growing admiration for the boy. Overcoming so many obstacles and still developing such advanced knowledge required extraordinary determination. Mrs. Smith, we would very much like your permission for Gabriel to work with us over the next month. We guarantee this won't interfere with his studies, and he will be properly rewarded for his time and knowledge. The lady looked at Richard with an intensity that made him feel like he was being evaluated by eyes that had seen many injustices in life. Mr. Aldridge, I'll be frank. People like you don't usually come to places like Riverdale unless they want something. Gabriel is all I have in life, and I know him well enough to know he won't give up this opportunity, with or without my permission. She paused, taking a sip of her coffee. But I also know how to recognize when God opens a door. My grandson deserves chances that I never had. I ask only 2 things: that you respect him as a human being, not just as a tool to save your rich company, and that you ensure he continues his education. Olivia, who had maintained a neutral expression until then, leaned forward. Mrs. Smith, I personally promise that I'll make sure Gabriel continues his studies during this period. We can even hire private tutors to work with him. The lady smiled. Slightly. You don't need all that luxury, young lady. I just need him to do his homework and take his tests. Gabriel has never needed much pushing to study. Richard felt a lump in his throat. You have my word that your grandson will be treated with the utmost respect, and that this experience will only add to his education. Well then, it's settled, concluded Mrs. Smith. But with one extra condition: I want to visit this place where he'll be working. I need to see with my own eyes that it's safe. Of course, Richard immediately agreed. We can take you today to see the apartment. The next day, the secret operation began. Richard's spacious Manhattan apartment had been transformed into an improvised technology center. Tables were installed in the living room, cutting-edge computers were brought in discreetly, and a digital whiteboard occupied an entire wall. The HEC team was small but powerful. Fernando led the development, along with 4 software engineers selected by Sylvia. Olivia, surprisingly, had taken over the general coordination of the project, revealing an efficiency that impressed even her father. And at the center of it all was Gabriel. In the first few days, the dynamics were tense. The engineers, all with degrees and years of experience, found it difficult to accept guidance from a 10-year-old boy. But as Gabriel demonstrated his extraordinary knowledge, the resistance fell away. The algorithm you're using for predictive analysis is outdated, Gabriel said to Robert, one of the most experienced engineers, during a work session. There's a much more efficient approach using deep learning with recurrent neural networks. Robert crossed his arms, defensive. This algorithm has been working well for the last 5 years. And that's why Horizon is losing market share, Gabriel retorted without filters. While you've settled for what works well, the world has changed. Silence took over the room. Robert opened his mouth to respond, but Fernando intervened. Gabriel, why don't you demonstrate your approach so we can evaluate it? The boy nodded and set to work. In 2 hours, he had created a prototype that processed the same data 5 times faster and with significantly superior accuracy. Robert observed the demonstration in silence. When it was finished, he simply said, "Okay, kid, you're right, we'll do it your way." It was the first of many small victories for Gabriel. Over the days, he gained not only respect, but also the admiration of the team. His mind worked in ways that the trained engineers couldn't follow, free from academic conventions and open to possibilities that formal education often stifled. Meanwhile, at Horizon headquarters, Richard was implementing the second part of the plan. Paul Vincent, the suspected spy, was assigned to lead a fake international expansion project that required constant travel and extensive reports. The executive, apparently flattered by the new responsibility, didn't realize he was being kept away from truly valuable information. "How's our friend Paul?" Richard asked Sylvia during one of his visits to the apartment. "Completely absorbed in the expansion project," she replied with a discreet smile. "He loves showing all the executives how close he is to you now, leading a strategic project." Richard nodded, satisfied. "And what about the new product? How are we doing?" Sylvia led him to the main workstation, where Fernando and Gabriel were hunched over lines of code. "We're revolutionizing the concept of financial predictive analysis," explained Fernando, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "What Gabriel proposed isn't just an evolution of Horizon Cloud, it's a complete reinvention." Richard looked at the boy, who seemed completely absorbed in his work. "Can you explain it to me in simple terms, Gabriel?" The boy raised his eyes from the computer. "We're creating a system that not only analyzes financial data, but understands the human behavior behind it. For example, most software predicts market trends based on pure numbers, ignoring social, cultural, and emotional factors that influence economic decisions." He pointed to a complex visualization on the screen. "Here, we're integrating sentiment, analysis from social media, regional consumption patterns, and even climate data to create a much more accurate predictive model." "And the accessibility?" Richard asked, remembering the promise of a product that would also serve small entrepreneurs. Gabriel opened a smile. "That's the best part. The system will have different access levels. Large corporations will have all the analytical power, but we've created a simplified and much more accessible version for small businesses and individual entrepreneurs." "Basically," Olivia intervened, who had approached to listen, "we're democratizing financial intelligence." Richard observed his daughter with surprise. In the last 2 weeks, Olivia had considerably changed her attitude toward Gabriel and the project as a whole. From skeptical and resistant, she had become a passionate advocate for the initiative. "And what about the deadline?" Richard asked. "We have only 2 weeks until the assembly." Fernando consulted a schedule on the wall. "We'll be ready for a demonstration next week. It won't be the final product, but it will be enough to show its potential to the shareholders." Richard felt a hope he hadn't experienced in months. Maybe, just maybe, they could turn the situation around. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out, now continuing. While the work in the apartment advanced, another situation was developing. In the Riverdale community, rumors about Gabriel's involvement with rich people began to circulate. The boy's prolonged absence, who now only appeared at home to sleep, accompanied by drivers in luxury cars, did not go unnoticed. One man in particular observed everything with growing concern. August Foster, 45, was a computer science teacher at the local community center. Years before, he had worked at Digitech, Richard's first company, and was laid off during the restructuring that followed the businessman's forced departure. Since then, he had dedicated his knowledge to teaching young people from the projects, including Gabriel, whom he considered his most brilliant student. On a Sunday afternoon, the only day Gabriel didn't go to the apartment, August knocked on Mrs. Smith's door. "Professor August!" exclaimed Gabriel when he saw him. "What a nice surprise. I was going to stop by the community center to tell you the news." The man smiled, but there was concern in his eyes. "I've been hearing a lot of stories about you lately, Gabriel. They say you're working for Richard Aldridge. Is that true?" Gabriel invited the professor to come in and sit down. With enthusiasm, he told about the secret project, the trust Richard had placed in him, and how they were about to revolutionize the financial technology market. August listened in silence, his expression becoming increasingly serious. "Gabriel, do you have any idea who Richard Aldridge really is?" The boy frowned. "Of course I do. He's one of the biggest technology entrepreneurs in America. He's also a man who built his fortune exploiting people," August said with bitterness. "I worked for him, you know, at Digitech before he founded Horizon." Gabriel's eyes widened. "You never told me that." "Because I don't like to remember," August replied. "When Richard was forced out of the company, many employees were laid off. In the restructuring that followed, I was one of them. I tried to get jobs at other technology companies, but the doors closed. Richard or Marcus, neither of them really cared about the workers who were left behind." Gabriel absorbed that information, visibly disturbed. "But Mr. Aldridge has been very good to me. He's paying me well, and he promised he would help me get into a better school after the project is finished." August leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the boy. "Of course he's being good now, he needs you. But when he gets what he wants, when he saves his precious company, do you think he'll remember the boy from the projects who helped him? You'll be discarded just like I was, Gabriel." "That's not true," the boy protested, but his voice no longer had the same conviction. "Gabriel, you're brilliant. You have a talent I've seen in very few people in my life. I don't want you to be used and then thrown away when you're no longer useful." Mrs. Smith, who had been listening to the conversation from the kitchen, approached. "Professor August, I understand your concern, but I've seen how that man looks at my grandson. It's not just interest, it's admiration." August shook his head. "Mrs. Smith, with all due respect, people like Richard Aldridge are masters at appearing admirable when they want something. Believe someone who has worked for him." The lady hesitated, looking at Gabriel with renewed concern. The boy remained silent for a few moments, processing all of this. Finally, he raised his eyes to his mentor. "Professor, I understand your concern, but this project isn't just about saving Mr. Aldridge's company. It's about creating something that can help many people, including here in Riverdale. We're developing a tool that small entrepreneurs can use." August seemed skeptical. "Gabriel, big companies always say they're helping the little guys, but in the end, they're the ones who profit." "Then I'll make sure it's different this time," Gabriel affirmed with surprising determination. "I'll make Mr. Aldridge keep that promise." The professor observed his student for a long moment. "You've always been stubborn, Gabriel. Just be careful not to be disappointed." August's visit left Gabriel disturbed. In the following days, while continuing to work in the apartment, the boy began to observe Richard with different eyes, looking for signs that would confirm or refute his mentor's words. Olivia, always attentive, noticed the change. "Something wrong, Gabriel?" she asked during a break, as the two shared a snack on the apartment's balcony. The boy hesitated. In recent weeks, he had developed a surprisingly close relationship with Olivia. After the initial resistance, she had become his biggest ally in the project, often defending his ideas when the more conservative engineers resisted. "Olivia, your dad, has he fired many people?" The question caught the woman by surprise. "Why do you want to know that?" Gabriel shrugged. "Just curious." Olivia studied him for a moment. "My father has made difficult decisions like any businessman. There were times when layoffs were necessary to save the company as a whole. And after I save his company, will he discard me too?" The question came out before Gabriel could contain it. Olivia's eyes widened, genuinely shocked. "Gabriel, where did that come from?" The boy lowered his gaze, embarrassed at having revealed his insecurities. "Nothing. Forget it." Olivia moved closer, and to Gabriel's surprise, put her hand on his shoulder. "Someone's been putting ideas in your head, haven't they? Look, I'm not going to lie to you. At first, when you showed up at my father's office, I thought it was a terrible idea to trust you. I thought it was a scam, or at the very least an unnecessary distraction." She paused, a sincere smile forming on her lips. "But in the last few weeks, I've seen something I didn't expect. I saw my father becoming the man he was before all the disappointments and betrayals he faced. I saw the sparkle in his eyes, the passion for innovation that has always defined him. And you know what caused that change? You, Gabriel." The boy looked up, surprised. "Me?" "Yes, you. My father doesn't see you just as a tool to save the company. He sees in you the same spirit he had when he started, decades ago. The same passion for creating, for turning ideas into reality." Gabriel felt a warmth in his chest, but the doubt persisted. "But what about after we finish the project? What if the company is saved?" Olivia smiled. "That's when the most interesting part begins. Do you really think that after seeing what you're capable of, my father will simply say, 'Thank you and goodbye'? Gabriel, talents like yours are extremely rare. My father is already talking about creating a scholarship program for young talents, inspired by you." The boy's eyes lit up. "Really? He never told me about that." "Because he wanted to be sure it would work before promising anything. He's coordinating with universities and investors. The idea is to identify young people with extraordinary potential in low-income communities and offer not just quality education, but also mentoring and real opportunities." Gabriel was silent, processing that information. Could it be that he was wrong about Richard? That his professor, marked by past hurts, wasn't seeing the man Richard had become? "Thank you for telling me this, Olivia," he finally said. "It means a lot." She gently squeezed his shoulder. "We're a team now, Gabriel, and teams trust each other." The work continued at an accelerated pace. Each day, the new system gained more features and stability. Gabriel practically lived in the apartment, returning home only to sleep, always accompanied by one of Richard's trusted drivers. With 1 week to go before the decisive assembly, it was time for the first major test. The system would be presented to a select group of Horizon executives, people of complete trust, who could evaluate its potential with critical eyes. The tension was palpable. Gabriel, wearing a button-up shirt that Olivia had insisted on buying for him, seemed out of place and nervous. "What if they don't like it?" he whispered to Fernando as the executives took their places for the presentation. "They will like it," the engineer assured him. "It's impossible not to like something so revolutionary." Richard opened the session with a brief introduction without revealing details of the product. He then handed over to Fernando, who explained the technical architecture of the system. Finally, it was Gabriel's turn. The boy stepped forward, his hands slightly trembling. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriel Smith, and I'm going to show you how what we created works in practice." He took a deep breath, remembering Olivia's words of encouragement. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, the nervousness gave way to confidence. Gabriel began to demonstrate the system with an eloquence and clarity that impressed even those who had been working with him for weeks. For 40 minutes, he guided the executives through the new product's functionalities, showing how it far surpassed anything available on the market. He demonstrated the simplified interface for small businesses, the analytical power for large corporations, and the revolutionary integration of social and behavioral variables in financial analysis. When he finished, a silence took over the room. Gabriel looked at Richard, uncertain. The businessman had an unreadable expression. Then, slowly, one of the executives began to applaud. Soon he was followed by another and another, until everyone was standing, applauding enthusiastically. "How extraordinary," exclaimed Renee Collins, marketing director. "It's exactly what we needed to regain the market." "The accessibility for small entrepreneurs is brilliant," added Charles Davis, commercial director. "It opens an entirely new market segment for us." Richard approached Gabriel and, to everyone's surprise, hugged the boy. "You did it, Gabriel. You really saved my company." The boy, emotional, could barely speak. He looked at Olivia, who was smiling with tears in her eyes, At that moment, all the doubts planted by August seemed distant. The meeting continued with a strategic discussion about how to present the product at the shareholders' assembly. The executives agreed that a similar demonstration, followed by solid financial projections, would be enough to convince shareholders to reject the Mendez Group's offer. When everyone left with only the original team remaining, Richard opened a bottle of champagne. For Gabriel, he served grape juice in an identical glass. "A toast to the future of Horizon," he proposed, raising his glass, "and to the young genius who made it possible." Everyone toasted. The atmosphere was one of celebration, but the joy was interrupted when Sylvia received a call. Her face paled as she listened. "What is it?" Richard asked, noticing the change. Sylvia hung up the phone, visibly disturbed. "That was my contact in the IT department. Paul Vincent returned early from his trip and is asking questions about a secret project he heard mentioned." The celebratory mood instantly dissipated. "How did he find out?" Fernando questioned. "I don't know," Sylvia replied, "but he's calling an emergency meeting with some directors for tomorrow morning." Richard frowned, thoughtful. "He can't be sure of anything. He's just fishing for information." "Even so, it's risky," Olivia argued. "If he suspects what we're doing and passes those suspicions to the Mendez Group, we need to accelerate," Richard concluded. "The assembly is scheduled for 6 days from now. Let's move it up to the day after tomorrow." "Is that possible?" Gabriel asked, concerned. "Do we have all the preparations ready?" Richard nodded. "I'll activate our legal department immediately. Meanwhile, we need to finish polishing the system and prepare the final presentation." The team dispersed, each with urgent tasks. Gabriel found himself working alongside Robert, finalizing some aspects of the predictive algorithm. "You really are incredible, kid," the engineer commented as they worked. "I've never seen anyone your age with so much knowledge and creativity." Gabriel smiled, flattered. "I've learned a lot from you guys too." Robert shook his head. "We're the ones who've learned. You showed us how stuck we were in our own conventions." They continued working in silence for some time, until Gabriel asked a question that bothered him. "Robert, do you think what we're creating will really help ordinary people? Small entrepreneurs, people from neighborhoods like mine?" The engineer reflected for a moment. "Honestly, it depends on how it's implemented. The technology itself definitely has that potential, but in the end, it's business decisions that determine who really benefits." Gabriel nodded, thoughtful. "And who makes those business decisions?" "In Horizon's case, mainly Richard and the board of directors." "I see." Robert noticed the concern on the boy's face. "What's bothering you, Gabriel?" "I want to be sure I'm doing the right thing, that I'm helping create something that will benefit people like my grandmother, my neighbors, my teacher at the community center." The engineer smiled. "You know, in my experience, truly revolutionary technologies always end up benefiting society as a whole, even if that wasn't the initial intention. And from what I've seen in recent weeks, Richard seems genuinely committed to the idea of democratizing access to advanced financial tools." Gabriel wanted to believe that. He wanted to trust that Richard would keep his word, that he wouldn't be just another rich businessman exploiting talent to get even richer. The next day was chaotic. Richard spent hours on the phone, coordinating with board members and key shareholders to ensure the assembly was moved up. Olivia coordinated the logistical preparations, while the technical team made final adjustments to the system. At the end of the day, confirmation came. The shareholders' assembly had been rescheduled for the following day at 2 p.m. "We did it," Richard announced, exhausted but relieved. "Tomorrow, we'll decide the future of Horizon." Gabriel, who had worked non-stop for almost 36 hours, was exhausted. His eyes burned and his mind, normally so sharp, was beginning to get foggy. "Go home and rest, Gabriel," Olivia suggested, noticing his condition. "You need to be rested for tomorrow." The boy nodded, grateful. "I'll just finish this test routine and then I'll go." When he finally finished, it was already past 10 at night. Richard's driver took him home, where he found Mrs. Smith waiting anxiously. "Child, what time is this?" she scolded, more concerned than angry. "You need to sleep." "Sorry, Grandma. Tomorrow's the big day. The assembly was moved up. The lady hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you, my grandson. No matter the outcome, you've already proven your worth." Gabriel smiled, feeling fatigue weighing on his bones. "Thank you, Grandma. I just wanted to be sure." "Sure of what, my child?" "That I'm doing the right thing," he replied, his voice heavy with sleep. "That I'm not just helping a rich man get richer." Mrs. Smith stroked his hair. "Gabriel, in all my life I've learned one thing. Good people do good things no matter the circumstances. And you, my grandson, are one of the best people I know. Trust your heart." The boy fell asleep with those words echoing in his mind. A turbulent sleep populated by dreams of codes, rich businessmen, and transformed communities. The next morning, Gabriel woke up with a clear and urgent idea. Before even having breakfast, he called Olivia. "I need to make a change to the system before the presentation," he said as soon as she answered. "Gabriel, it's 7 in the morning. What change?" "It's important, Olivia. Very important. Can you send the driver to pick me up now?" An hour later, Gabriel was back at the apartment, working furiously on his computer. Fernando and Robert watched with curiosity. "What exactly are you doing, Gabriel?" Fernando asked, concerned. "We can't risk destabilizing the system now." "I'm not going to destabilize anything," the boy assured. "I'm just adding a protection layer, a guarantee." "A guarantee against what?" Fernando insisted. Gabriel paused for a moment, looking directly at the two engineers. "Against the possibility that this technology never reaches those who really need it." Robert and Fernando exchanged intrigued looks, but didn't interfere. Over the weeks, they had learned to trust the boy's judgment. When Richard arrived, Gabriel had already finished his mysterious modification, and the system was ready for the final demonstration. "How are you feeling?" asked the businessman, noticing the serious expression on the boy's face. "Nervous," Gabriel admitted, "but confident." Richard smiled. "You've done the impossible, Gabriel. No matter what happens today, I want you to know that you've changed Horizon forever. And you've changed my life too." The boy hesitated, then took courage to ask the question that tormented him. "Mr. Albridge, when all this is over, when the company is saved, what will happen to our system? Will it really be available to small entrepreneurs, to people like my grandmother who sells baked goods to supplement her retirement, to my neighbor who fixes appliances in his garage?" Richard put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Gabriel, I gave you my word, didn't I? The system will have accessible versions for small entrepreneurs. This isn't just a business commitment, it's a personal commitment." "And the scholarship program for young talents from underserved communities," Gabriel continued. "Olivia told me about that." The businessman gave his daughter, who was on the other side of the room, a surprised look. "She shouldn't have mentioned that yet. I wanted to surprise you when everything was formalized." "So it's true?" Gabriel's eyes sparkled. Richard nodded. "Completely true. We're finalizing partnerships with universities and defining the criteria. You'll be our first scholar if you want, of course." Gabriel felt a wave of relief. Maybe his professor was wrong. Maybe Richard Albridge wasn't just another greedy businessman. Maybe he really saw value in people like him, regardless of their background. At 1 p.m., the team left for Horizon headquarters. The assembly was scheduled for 2 p.m., and they would need some time to prepare the demonstration in the main auditorium. Upon arrival, they were greeted by a palpable climate of tension. Executives walked hurriedly through the corridors, whispering in groups. Some looked curiously at Gabriel, who clearly stood out in that corporate environment. "Something's wrong," Sylvia murmured, approaching Richard. "Paul has been meeting with some directors in the conference room since early morning." Richard frowned. "He shouldn't be a problem. Without concrete evidence, it's just speculation." They proceeded to the auditorium, where they began preparing the equipment for the presentation. Gabriel worked with Fernando on setting up the system, while Olivia checked the slides and supporting materials. 20 minutes before the assembly was due to begin, the auditorium started to fill up. Important shareholders, board members, and high-ranking executives took their places. Gabriel, hidden backstage, observed this world so different from his, own with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. "You're going to crush it," said Olivia, approaching him. "Just be yourself and show what the system can do. The boy nodded, grateful for the support. In recent days, Olivia had become almost an older sister to him, always offering guidance and encouragement. At 2 p.m. sharp, Richard took the stage. The auditorium fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your presence at this extraordinary assembly. As you know, we are facing a crucial decision for the future of Horizon technology. He paused, his eyes scanning the audience. 4 weeks ago, we received a purchase offer from the Mendez Group. At the time, given the difficulties we were facing, many considered this offer as the only viable way out. I myself came to think so. Another brief silence. But today I'm here to show that there is another way, a path that not only preserves Horizon's independence, but puts us back at the forefront of the American technology market. Richard then began to present the problems the company was facing, the loss of market share, the challenges with the Horizon Cloud project. He then explained how a special team had worked in recent weeks to develop a revolutionary solution. And now I would like to introduce the main architect of this solution, someone whose talent and vision have completely transformed our approach. A murmur ran through the auditorium. Everyone expected him to call a well-known executive or renowned consultant. Please welcome Gabriel Smith. The silence was absolute when Gabriel took the stage. Many shareholders exchanged confused looks. A boy? Was this some kind of joke? But the confusion quickly gave way to astonishment when Gabriel began his presentation. With surprising eloquence for his age, he explained the vision behind the new system, how it solved the problems of Horizon Cloud, and more importantly, how it drastically expanded the company's potential market. Our system not only surpasses anything currently available, but it also democratizes access to financial intelligence, Gabriel explained, his voice gaining confidence with each word. For the first time, small entrepreneurs will have access to advanced analytical tools at affordable prices. The demonstration that followed was impeccable. Gabriel guided those present through the various functionalities of the system, showing specific use cases and impressive market projections. When he finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. Several shareholders stood up, visibly excited about the new product's potential. Richard returned to the stage, thanking Gabriel, who went backstage where he was received with enthusiastic hugs from Olivia, Fernando, and the rest of the team. "You were amazing!" exclaimed Olivia, hugging him. On stage, Richard was now presenting financial projections based on the new system. The growth expectations were extraordinary, far exceeding the value offered by the Mendez Group. It seemed that victory was guaranteed, but then Paul Vincent stood up from the audience. "Mr. Chairman, I request to speak." Richard hesitated for a moment, but agreed. "You have the floor, Mr. Vincent." Paul took the stage with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I must admit I was impressed with the presentation, truly remarkable. But I have some questions that need to be clarified before the shareholders can make an informed decision." He turned to the audience. "First, this revolutionary system was developed by an unofficial team working outside company facilities without proper supervision or quality controls." A murmur of concern ran through the auditorium. "Second, the supposed architect of this system is a 10-year-old boy without any formal training. Are we really considering basing Horizon's future on something created by a child?" Paul made a dramatic pause. "And third, more worryingly, I have information that this same boy illegally hacked into our systems a few months ago. Instead of being reported to the authorities, he was hired. This raises serious ethical and security questions." The mood in the auditorium changed drastically. Excitement gave way to concern and skepticism. Backstage, Gabriel went pale. "How did he find out about the hack?" he whispered to Olivia. Before she could answer, she saw Richard take control of the situation again. "Mr. Vincent, I appreciate your points. Indeed, we adopted an unconventional approach due to the extraordinary circumstances. As for Gabriel Smith's talent, I invite any expert present to evaluate the system's code. You will find work of exceptional quality." Paul was not intimidated. Still, the ethical question remains. Are we rewarding illegal activities? What message does that send? It was then that an unexpected voice spoke up from the audience. "If I may, Mr. Chairman." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Charles Davis, one of the company's most respected directors. "The history of technology is full of innovators who started in unconventional ways," he said, standing up. "Steve Jobs and Wozniak created the first Apple in a garage. Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook in a college dorm room. And yes, many young computing talents started by exploring systems in ways that weren't always strictly legal." He paused, looking directly at Paul. "The question we should be asking ourselves is not how this technology began, but what it can become. And from what I saw today, the potential is immense." Other directors and shareholders began to express support. The mood changed again, swinging favorably toward Richard and Gabriel. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Paul, realizing he was losing ground, played his last card. "I have here an independent technical report questioning the long-term viability of this system," he said, brandishing a document. "According to this analysis, there are structural flaws that were not addressed in the presentation." Gabriel couldn't contain himself. Before Olivia could stop him, he left backstage and walked to the stage. "Excuse me," he said, his voice echoing through the microphone. "May I see that report?" Paul seemed momentarily disconcerted, but handed the document to the boy. Gabriel examined it for a few minutes, while a tense silence dominated the auditorium. "This report is analyzing the old version of Horizon Cloud," he finally said, returning the papers. "It has nothing to do with the system we developed." Paul opened his mouth to counter, but Gabriel continued. "Besides, I can prove that you have been in regular contact with executives from the Mendez Group in recent weeks. I have photos, call records, and evidence of bank transfers." Paul's face went pale. That's absurd," he stammered. Gabriel looked directly at Richard, as if asking permission to continue. The businessman nodded slightly. "Actually," the boy continued, "part of the changes we made to the system was to track how confidential information was leaking. All the evidence points to you, Mr. Vincent." A shocked murmur ran through the auditorium. Paul looked around like a cornered animal. "This is defamation. I'll sue." "The evidence will be handed over to the legal department," Richard interrupted, his voice firm. "For now, Mr. Vincent, I request that you leave the assembly." 2 security guards approached Paul, who walked out stiffly, casting a furious glance at Gabriel. Richard turned to the shareholders. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's clear what's happening here. On one hand, we have a purchase offer from me, a competitor who has benefited from corporate espionage, and on the other, an innovative solution that can transform the market and elevate Horizon to new heights." He paused, looking at Gabriel with evident pride. "The choice we make today is not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the kind of company we want to be, a company that values innovation, that recognizes extraordinary talent regardless of its origin, and that doesn't bow to pressure from unethical competitors." Richard's words resonated deeply. One by one, the shareholders began to express their support for Horizon's independent continuation and the development of the new system. When the formal vote took place, the result was overwhelming. 78% voted against the sale to the Mendez Group. Horizon was saved. The next day, the main business newspapers reported the surprising turnaround at Horizon Technology. Some vaguely mentioned revolutionary technological innovations as the reason for rejecting the Mendez Group's offer, but none had the complete story. Richard preferred to keep Gabriel away from the spotlight, protecting his privacy. A week after the assembly, Richard organized a small celebration in the apartment that had served as an operations base. Only the people directly involved in the project were present: Fernando, Sylvia, Robert, and the other engineers, Olivia, Gabriel, and, at the boys' special request, Mrs. Smith and Professor August. "When Gabriel invited me, I confess I was surprised," commented August, accepting a glass of champagne from Richard. "I didn't expect to be welcome after the things I said about you." Richard smiled. "Gabriel told me about your conversation. You had every right to be concerned about him. And, to be honest, many of the criticisms were justified. August raised his eyebrows, surprised by the frankness. They were. I made mistakes throughout my career, Richard admitted. There were times when I put profit and growth above people's well-being. The crisis that almost destroyed Horizon was, in part, karma for those choices. He looked at Gabriel, who was animatedly talking with Olivia and Robert on the other side of the room. But this extraordinary kid not only saved my company, he reminded me why I started in this field in the first place, to create technologies that truly improve people's lives. August studied Richard for a moment, as if reassessing the man before him. So, what happens now? Richard took a sip of his drink before answering. Officially, the new system will be launched next quarter. As promised, it will have accessible versions for small entrepreneurs. We're working with development banks to create special financing lines for businesses in low-income communities. He paused, looking directly at August. And unofficially, I'm creating a foundation to identify and support young talents from underserved communities. I would very much like you to consider being part of it, Professor August. Your knowledge and experience would be invaluable. The professor couldn't hide his surprise. Me? Why? Because you trained Gabriel. You saw his potential when no one else did. I imagine how many other Gabriels are out there, just needing an opportunity. August reflected for a moment. I'll think about it. On the other side of the room, Gabriel was observing the interaction between his mentor and Richard. It was strange to see those two worlds meeting, the community center teacher who had always encouraged him and the billionaire who had given him the chance to prove his worth. What are you thinking about? Asked Olivia, approaching. About how strange life is, Gabriel replied. A month ago, I was just a kid trying to hack systems to prove I could. Now you're the boy who saved $1 billion company, she completed, smiling, and revolutionized the financial analysis market in the process. Gabriel shook his head. I still haven't gotten used to it. Well, you'd better get used to it, said Olivia, because your future has just begun. Richard approached the two. Gabriel, do you have a minute? I'd like to show you something. The boy followed Richard to a laptop open on the table. On the screen was an official document with the Horizon logo. What is this? Asked Gabriel. It's the contract for the Horizon Future program, explained Richard. The initiative I mentioned to identify and support young talents from underserved communities. Gabriel examined the document, his eyes widening as he saw the details. This is incredible. Scholarships, mentoring, access to cutting-edge technology. Richard smiled. And see the last page. Gabriel scrolled to the end of the document and froze. There was his name, listed as Senior Innovation Technology Consultant. Me? No one better to help identify exceptional talents than another exceptional talent, Richard replied. Of course it would be a part-time job so as not to interfere with your studies, and well paid. The boy felt tears forming in his eyes. I don't even know what to say. Say yes, suggested Richard, putting his hand on his shoulder. Horizon needs you, Gabriel. I need you. Yes, Gabriel replied, his voice choked with emotion. 1,000 times yes. The businessman smiled. Excellent. Oh, and there's one more thing. Remember that mysterious modification you made to the system before the presentation? That protection layer? Gabriel swallowed hard. I remember. Our engineers finally discovered what it was. A very elegant code that essentially prevents the system from being used exclusively by large corporations. If the accessible version is discontinued, the entire system refuses to function. The boy lowered his gaze, expecting a reprimand. It was a safety measure, he explained quietly, to ensure the promise would be kept. To his surprise, Richard laughed. It was brilliant, and exactly the kind of thinking we need to ensure that technology serves everyone, not just the privileged. Gabriel looked up, relieved and emotional. So, you're not angry? Angry. I'm impressed. That's the kind of vision I want for Horizon going forward. At that moment, Mrs. Smith approached. Gabriel, it's getting late. I think it's time for us to go. Richard nodded. Of course, Mrs. Smith. My driver can take you. Gabriel, we'll see you Monday to officially start the program. Definitely. the boy replied enthusiastically. As he said goodbye to everyone, Gabriel approached Olivia. "Thank you for believing in me," he said, "even when you thought I was just a meddling kid." She smiled, leaning down to hug him. "You were never just a meddling kid, Gabriel. You were the inspiration we all needed." Later, in the car returning to Riverdale, Gabriel looked out the window, observing the illuminated city. On one side, the skyscrapers of the financial center, on the other, the more modest lights of the city's outskirts. Two worlds that had always seemed so distant, but that he had now helped bring a little closer together. "What are you thinking?" "About?" asked Mrs. Smith. Gabriel smiled. "About how one idea can change everything." 3 months later, the system developed by Gabriel was officially launched. Simply called Horizon for All, it quickly became a phenomenon in the market. Large corporations adopted the premium version, impressed by its revolutionary predictive capability. But it was the accessible version that really made a social impact, allowing thousands of small entrepreneurs to access analytical tools previously restricted to large companies. Riverdale became a case study. With support from the newly created Horizon Future Foundation, several local small businesses began to thrive. The community center, now led by Professor August as part of the foundation, became a technological training hub for young people from underserved communities. Gabriel, now 11, divided his time between school, where he finally found challenges worthy of his intelligence, thanks to a full scholarship at one of the best institutions in New York. His work at the foundation and personal projects he continued to develop in his renovated room, courtesy of his salary as a consultant. On a Friday afternoon after a foundation meeting, Gabriel met with Richard and Olivia at the coffee shop of Horizon's new Innovation Center, strategically located on the border between the business zone and the city's outskirts. "I just received the first quarter reports," commented Richard, visibly satisfied. "Horizon for All exceeded all expectations. The company's shares are at their highest level in 5 years." Gabriel smiled, proud. "And the small entrepreneurs? How are their numbers?" "More than 10,000 registered in New York alone," replied Olivia, who now led the division responsible for the accessible version of the system. "And most importantly, 78% report increased revenue after starting to use the platform." The boy nodded, satisfied. That's what really mattered to him, seeing ordinary people like his grandmother and his neighbors benefiting from the technology he had helped create. "Oh, I received an interesting call today," added Richard, with a mischievous smile. "Guess who wants to talk about a possible partnership?" Gabriel and Olivia looked at him with curiosity. "Marcus Mendez," revealed Richard, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "Apparently, the Mendez Group is having difficulties competing with our new platform. He proposed collaboration instead of competition." "And what did you answer?" asked Gabriel, intrigued. Richard shrugged. "I said I would consider the proposal, but with one non-negotiable condition. Any partnership would have to maintain and expand the commitment to accessibility for small entrepreneurs." Gabriel's face lit up. "And did he accept?" "He said he'll think about it," Richard replied with a smile. "But I don't think he has much choice. The market has changed, Gabriel. Thanks to you." Olivia raised her coffee cup, a toast to the boy who saved a company and transformed a market. Gabriel felt his face flush. "I just had an idea. You helped make it a reality." "The right idea, at the right time, presented in the right way," Richard replied. "That makes all the difference." As he watched Richard and Olivia discussing the next steps for the company, Gabriel reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought him here. From a curious boy from the projects, trying to hack systems to prove his worth, to a respected consultant helping shape the future of financial technology in America. His gaze wandered out the coffee shop window, where he could see the contrast between the imposing business buildings and the modest structures of the outskirts in the distance. In the past, these two worlds seemed irreconcilable. Now, thanks to an unlikely combination of circumstances, a desperate businessman, an innovative idea, and the courage of a 10-year-old boy, the distance between them was slowly beginning to diminish. "What are you thinking about?" asked Olivia, noticing his distant look. Gabriel smiled. About how sometimes the most unlikely solutions come from the most unexpected places. End of story.